Close your eyes and let your mind drift southward, beyond the familiar warmth of your bed, beyond the reach of city lights and human voices. Feel yourself drawn toward the bottom of our world, where Antarctica spreads like a vast white silence. Across the curve of the earth, here in this realm of endless winter, something extraordinary waits beneath your feet. Imagine yourself standing on the surface of this frozen continent, where the wind carries no scent of flowers or earth, only the pure, sharp breath of ice that has known no seasons for millions of years. The ground beneath you is not ground at all, but the surface of a frozen ocean, layer upon layer of compressed snow that has accumulated grain by grain, storm by storm, century by century. Now, let your consciousness sink downward like a warm stone dropping through cold water. You descend through the first layer of ice, where the crystals still remember the sky. Each frozen droplet holds within it a tiny bubble of ancient atmosphere, a whisper of air that once danced with clouds above oceans that no longer exist. The ice here is young, perhaps only a few hundred years old, and it still carries the faint memory of the surface world. Deeper you go, and the ice around you grows denser, more patient. The weight above presses down with the accumulated mass of centuries, squeezing the frozen water into forms that would feel alien in your hand. This is ice that has forgotten seasons, ice that has never melted, never flowed, never known the gentle touch of rain. It simply exists, layer after layer, holding the history of Earth's breath in its crystalline embrace. The pressure here is immense. Imagine the weight of 1,000 elephants pressing down on every square foot of your body. Yet you move through this crushing embrace like a ghost, feeling the profound silence that comes from being buried beneath miles of frozen time. There is no sound here except the occasional groan of ice settling under its own impossible weight. A sound so deep and slow that it barely registers as sound at all. As you descend further, the ice begins to tell different stories. You pass through layers that remember ice ages, through frozen moments when mammoths walked the earth and early humans first looked up at stars. The ice here is darker, denser, compressed into forms that barely resemble the snow that fell from ancient skies. Each layer is a page in Earth's diary, written in crystal and pressure, recording the slow dance of climate across geological time. Miles below the surface now, you enter a realm that exists nowhere else on Earth. Here, the immense weight of all. That ice above creates pressures that transform the very nature of water itself. The ice beneath you is not the brittle, sharp-edged ice of your freezer, but something denser, more plastic, flowing like honey that has been slowed to the speed of stone. It moves, but so slowly that its movement is measured not in minutes or hours, but in centuries. And then, impossibly, you sense something else. Through the crushing darkness, through the silence that has known no interruption for epochs, you feel the presence of liquid water. Not the sharp, cold melt of surface ice, but something warmer, more patient, more alive. It waits in vast chambers, carved from rock and ice, lakes that have never known sunlight, never felt the kiss of wind across their surface. Now, as the final chapter of this journey through hidden waters draws to its gentle close, let your consciousness begin its slow ascent back through the layers of ice and understanding, carrying with you the profound peace that comes from having touched something ancient and enduring, something that connects the present moment to depths of time that transform all ordinary concerns into the whispered background music of existence. Feel yourself rising like a breath of warm air through the miles of compressed ice, through layers that mark the passage of centuries and millennia, through the frozen archives of atmospheric history and climatic change, carrying with you the memory of liquid water that has persisted in darkness for longer than complex life has walked the earth. The echo of those hidden depths follows you upward, not a sound, but something deeper than sound, a resonance that harmonizes with the rhythm of your own heartbeat, the cycle of your own breathing, the gentle tide of approaching sleep. As you ascend through the ice sheet, you pass again through all the layers of this frozen world, but now with understanding that transforms what once seemed like simple ice into a complex archive of Earth's history. A library written in crystal and pressure, a record of atmospheric breathing that spans millions of years. Each layer tells its story, not just of temperature and precipitation, but of the delicate balance that maintains liquid water in chambers far below, water that has learned to exist in conditions that challenge the very definition of possibility. Radio waves that first revealed these hidden lakes seem to accompany your ascent, invisible messengers that continue their patient work of mapping underwater coastlines that will never know tides, measuring the chemistry of water that has never tasted sunlight, detecting the subtle signatures that might indicate life in Earth's most impossible places. These electromagnetic signals become the lullaby that carries you upward, their scientific precision transformed into poetry by the magnitude of what they have discovered. You carry with you the memory of Lake Vostok's ancient mirror, water that has reflected nothing but ice for 15 million years, yet somehow reflects back to human consciousness insights into the nature of persistence, patience, and the extraordinary conditions that can sustain liquid presence in the most unlikely environments. The age of that water becomes a comfort rather than an overwhelming concept, proof that stability and continuity are possible even in a universe that seems dominated by change and impermanence. The chemistry of those hidden waters follows you like a blessing. Dissolved minerals that speak of geological processes operating on timescales that put all human concerns into perspective. Those chemical gradients and reactions that unfold over centuries become metaphors for the slow processes by which understanding develops, wisdom accumulates, and consciousness finds its place in the vast scales of cosmic time and space. The possibility of life in those depths, whether real or imagined, accompanies your ascent like a whisper of hope that transcends ordinary hope. If life can exist in conditions so extreme that they barely qualify as conditions for life at all, then perhaps consciousness itself is more resilient and adaptable than we normally dare to believe. Perhaps the spark of awareness that contemplates these hidden lakes is itself proof of the same extraordinary persistence that keeps water liquid in the crushing darkness beneath miles of ice. The circulation patterns of those buried waters become the rhythm of your breathing as sleep approaches. Currents that flow with the patience of geological time, carrying dissolved nutrients and chemical messages throughout underwater ecosystems that operate according to principles that expand our understanding of what is possible in the universe. These currents connect every molecule of hidden water to every other molecule, creating unity in circulation that mirror the connections between thoughts, between moments of understanding, between the individual consciousness and the vast systems of which it is part. The patience of the scientists who study these environments becomes your own patience with the process of falling asleep. Their willingness to work on timescales that transcend individual human lives, inspiring a similar willingness to trust in processes that operate beyond the reach of conscious control. Their careful methodology, their reverence for the environments they study, their recognition of the profound responsibility that comes with being the first to encounter these ancient waters, all of this transforms into an acceptance of the mystery that surrounds consciousness itself. As you approach the surface of waking consciousness, preparing to cross the boundary into sleep, the hidden lakes remain far. This chemical solitude has created an environment that may support forms of life so different from surface organisms that they might represent entirely new branches of the tree of life, organisms that have evolved to thrive in chemical conditions that would be instantly lethal to most Earth life. Yet here, they may find not just survival, but abundance in chemistry. In the chemical darkness of these hidden waters, your consciousness now turns to the most profound question of all. Could life exist here, in this realm of perpetual night and crushing pressure, in water that has been isolated from the sun and the surface world for longer than complex life has walked the earth? Let your imagination drift through the possibility of organisms so adapted to this alien environment that they might represent life's ultimate achievement in persistence and adaptation. Think of life as you know it, dependent on sunlight, breathing, air, requiring temperatures that rarely venture far from the narrow range that allows liquid water to exist at surface pressure. Now imagine life that has learned to abandon all these requirements, life that has discovered how to thrive in conditions that would destroy every familiar organism within moments. In the darkness beneath Antarctica's ice, evolution may have written its most remarkable chapter. Picture microscopic organisms drifting through the black water like living stars, their metabolism slowed to a whisper of activity that allows them to survive on the minimal energy available in this chemical environment. These are not the rapid, energetic bacteria of surface waters that double their population every few hours. These are organisms that have learned patience, that measure their life cycles not in hours or days, but in years or decades, that have evolved to exist in a state of near-suspended animation, while still maintaining the spark of life. Their energy does not come from sunlight, but from chemistry, the slow oxidation of dissolved metals, the gradual processing of sulfur compounds, the patient extraction of energy from chemical gradients that have been building for millions of years. They are chemosynthetic organisms, life forms that have learned to eat the very rocks and minerals that surround them, converting the chemistry of stone into the energy of life through metabolic pathways that exist nowhere else on Earth. Hidden organisms may have had 15 million years to evolve in complete isolation, developing along evolutionary pathways that have never been influenced by surface life, never been subject to the competitive pressures that shape evolution. In the sunlit world above, they represent an entirely separate experiment in life, a biological laboratory that has been operating in darkness for longer than mammals have dominated the surface world. Imagine single-celled organisms that have learned to withstand pressures that would instantly crush any surface life form. Their cellular walls reinforced with proteins and compounds that can maintain integrity under conditions that exist nowhere else on Earth. Their biochemistry operates at near freezing temperatures. Their enzymes adapted to function in the slow motion chemistry of the deep cold. Their entire metabolic machinery designed for a world where chemical reactions unfold over geological timescales. Some of these organisms might exist in forms that challenge our very definition of life. They might spend most of their existence in a state of cryptobiosis, condition so close to death that it's barely distinguishable from non-life, yet retaining the ability to return to active metabolism when conditions allow. They could be organisms that blur the line between living and non-living, between biology and chemistry, existing in a state that science is only beginning to understand. The darkness itself may have shaped these organisms in ways that create entirely new forms of biological organization. Without light to provide energy or signals, these organisms may have evolved other forms of communication and energy transfer. They might use chemical signals that travel through the water like molecular messages, creating networks of communication that span the entire lake through chemical gradients that carry information across hundreds of miles of dark water. There, reproduction might operate on timescales that seem impossible to organisms accustomed to the rapid cycles of surface life. A single organism might reproduce only once in a century, but with such precision and efficiency that it can maintain stable populations over millions of years. They might have evolved reproductive strategies that are triggered by chemical cycles, or pressure changes that occur over geological timescales, waiting centuries between reproductive events. These organisms might exist in communities that are unlike any ecosystem on Earth's surface. Instead of the competitive relationships that characterize surface life, they might have evolved cooperative relationships that allow them to share the minimal energy available in their environment. They might form symbiotic communities where different organisms specialize in different aspects of survival, some extracting energy from iron compounds, others processing sulfur, still others managing waste products in ways that support the entire community. The extreme conditions of their environment might have forced them to develop biological capabilities that seem almost magical to surface life. They might be able to repair damage from pressure and cold that would be instantly fatal to other organisms. They might have evolved mechanisms for surviving the rare, catastrophic events that occur in their environment changes in pressure, temperature fluctuations, or chemical disruptions that occur over geological timescales. Some of these organisms might be so small that they exist at the very limits of what can be considered alive molecular machines that operate at the intersection of biology and chemistry, using the dissolved minerals in the water as both fuel and building materials. They might be organisms that exist more as chemical processes than as discrete living entities. Their bodies consisting of organized chemical reactions that persist in the dark water without any of the cellular structures that define life as we know it. The isolation of these organisms means that they might represent entirely new branches of the tree of life, biological lineages that separated from all other earth life so long ago that they share only the most fundamental characteristics with the organisms of the surface world. They might use different biochemical pathways, different genetic codes, different methods of storing and transmitting hereditary information. They might be aliens in the most literal sense life forms, so different from surface life that they represent a completely separate genesis of biological organization. Yet despite their alien nature, these organisms might also represent life's ultimate triumph, proof that biology can adapt to any environment, can find ways to persist and even thrive in conditions that seem completely hostile to life. They might be the ultimate extremophiles, organisms that have pushed the boundaries of what life can tolerate so far that they redefine our understanding of the possible. In the perfect darkness of these hidden waters, surrounded by crushing pressure and chemical conditions that exist nowhere else on Earth, these whispered organisms might be carrying on the quiet business of life with a persistence and patience that transcends human understanding. They might be the living proof that life, once it begins, finds ways to continue that are limited only by the laws of physics and chemistry, ways to persist that operate on timescales that connect the present moment to the deepest past and the most distant future. And in their quiet persistence, in their whispered existence in the darkness beneath the ice, they might be teaching us something profound about the nature of life itself, that it is not the rapid, energetic, competitive process we observe on the surface, but something deeper and more patient, something that can find ways to continue even in the most impossible places. From the whispered possibility of life in the darkness, let your awareness expand to embrace the movement of the waters themselves, the slow, majestic circulation that connects every drop in these hidden lakes to every other drop, creating patterns of flow that operate like the planet's own circulatory system, carrying dissolved nutrients and chemical messages across underwater landscapes that have never known the touch of wind or tide. Imagine yourself as a water molecule beginning a journey that will take centuries to complete, caught in currents that move with the stately grace of continental drift. You are part of a circulation system that operates according to principles as fundamental as gravity and heat, yet creates patterns of movement so complex and beautiful that they resemble the thoughts of some vast geological intelligence contemplating itself across millions of years. Your journey begins near the lake floor, where geothermal heat rising from Earth's interior warms the water just enough to make it slightly less dense than the cooler water above. This tiny difference in density, perhaps only a fraction of a degree in temperature, becomes the driving force for a circulation system that spans the entire lake. You begin to rise, carried upward by convection currents that operate like an impossibly slow-motion version of the air currents that create weather in the atmosphere above dot. As you rise through the water column, you carry with you dissolved minerals, extracted from the rocks below, chemical nutrients that have been leached from stone over millions of years. You are a courier in a delivery system that operates on geological timescales, transporting the chemical building blocks of life, if life exists here, from the depths where they are created to the upper waters where they might be consumed by organisms adapted to this alien environment. The currents that carry you are influenced by forces that barely register as forces at all. The rotation of the Earth, which creates the Coriolis effect that drives weather patterns on the surface, also influences the movement of water in these hidden lakes, causing currents to curve and spiral in patterns that mirror the planet's own rotation. The gravitational pull of the moon, which drives the tides in Earth's oceans, also affects these buried waters, creating pressure variations so subtle that they can barely be measured, yet persistent enough to influence circulation. Patterns over centuries. You sense the presence of underwater topography that shapes the currents like an invisible landscape. The floor of the lake is not smooth, but sculpted by millions of years of sedimentation and geological process, creating underwater mountains and valleys that channel the flow of water in directions dictated by the ancient history of the bedrock beneath Antarctica. These underwater features create their own weather systems, regions where currents converge and diverge, where upwelling brings chemical-rich water from the depths, where downdrafts carry surface water into the abyssal regions of the lake. Boundaries between different water masses create interfaces that are as distinct as weather fronts, yet they persist for centuries without changing. You pass through regions where water of different temperatures and chemical compositions meet, but do not mix, creating layers that are as real as the boundaries between different countries, yet exist in 3 dimensions throughout the water column. These thermoclines and chemiclines create habitats that might support different forms of life, each adapted to the specific conditions that exist at different depths and different chemical concentrations. Your movement is influenced by the ice ceiling above, which is not static, but flows and deforms under its own weight, creating pressure waves that ripple through the water below like the echoes of some vast, slow-motion earthquake. The ice moves in patterns that operate over thousands of years, grinding and flowing in directions dictated by the accumulated weight of snow that fell during ice ages. Yet this movement creates currents in the water below that respond to the changing pressure with the sensitivity of a vast liquid barometer dot. As you complete your journey through the upper reaches of the lake, you begin to cool, your temperature dropping by fractions of a degree as you move away from the geothermal heat sources below. This cooling makes you denser, and you begin to sink, starting a downward journey that will carry you back toward the lake floor in currents that operate like liquid escalators, transporting water and dissolved materials in vertical cycles that connect the surface and depths of the lake in patterns that have persisted for millions of years. The circulation creates mixing patterns that are essential for distributing whatever life might exist in these waters throughout the entire lake. Ecosystem. Chemical nutrients released in one region are carried by currents to distant parts of the lake, while waste products are transported away from their sources and diluted throughout the water column. The circulation system acts like the bloodstream of the lake, maintaining chemical balance and distributing resources in patterns that support the entire aquatic environment. You become aware that these currents carry more than just dissolved chemicals, they carry information. The water itself becomes a medium for communication across the lake, carrying chemical signals that might be produced by living organisms, distributing pheromones or other molecular messages that allow life forms to communicate across distances. That would be impossible for organisms limited to direct contact. The currents become the nervous system of the lake, carrying chemical information throughout the entire water body in patterns that operate like thoughts moving through a vast, liquid brain. The patterns of circulation are also influenced by this shape of the lake itself, which has been carved by millions of years of interaction between ice, water, and rock. The lake boundaries create their own flow patterns, with currents that follow the contours of the underwater landscape like rivers following valleys, creating circulation cells that might persist for thousands of years, carrying water and dissolved materials in loops that connect different regions of the lake in patterns that have operated since the lake first formed. Some currents move horizontally, following the temperature gradients created by geothermal heating, while others move vertically, driven by the convection created by density differences. These different circulation patterns interact with each other to create three-dimensional flow patterns of extraordinary complexity, currents that spiral and interweave like liquid DNA, creating a circulation system that is both beautiful and functional, both artistic and essential for maintaining the chemical and physical balance of the lake. Environment. As your journey through the currents continues, you begin to understand that you are part of something larger than a simple circulation system. You are part of the lake's own form of breathing, its method of staying alive and maintaining the delicate balance of conditions that allow it to persist as a liquid environment in a world of ice. The currents are the lake's way of thinking, its method of processing information and maintaining awareness of its own condition across the vast scales of space and time that define its existence. The pulse of these hidden currents connects every part of the lake to every other part, creating a unity of circulation that makes the entire water body function as a single integrated system. In this circulation, you find the heartbeat of the hidden world, the rhythm that maintains life, if life exists, and preserves the chemical and physical integrity of Earth's most isolated aquatic environment. From the flowing currents of the hidden lakes, let your consciousness rise upward through the miles of ice above, following the patient work of scientists who read the frozen layers like pages in Earth's most ancient library. Each stratum of ice carries within it the breath of ancient skies, the chemical signatures of atmospheres that existed when the world was young, when different combinations of gases painted different colors across heavens that no human eye has ever seen. Imagine yourself as a snowflake that fell 1,000,000 years ago, settling onto the surface of Antarctica during a time when the planet's climate was different, when the chemistry of the atmosphere carried different proportions of oxygen and carbon dioxide, when trace gases that no longer exist drifted through air that tasted of different seasons and different weather patterns. You become part of the ice sheet, compressed and transformed by the weight of countless storms that followed you, yet still carrying within your crystalline structure the chemical memory of that ancient moment when you first touched the earth. Layer by layer, year by year, century by century, you are buried deeper beneath the accumulating weight of time. Each new storm that passes over the surface adds another page to the frozen library, another thin stratum of ice that captures the chemical signature of the atmosphere at that precise moment in Earth's history. The ice becomes a chronometer, a clock made of frozen time that records not just the passage of years, but the changing moods of an entire planet. Scientists who study these ice cores work with tools that can read the chemical language written in frozen water. They extract columns of ice that span hundreds of thousands of years, drilling through layers that chronicle ice ages and warm periods, through strata that remember the rise and fall of atmospheric carbon dioxide, through frozen moments that capture the chemical exhales of ancient volcanoes, and the atmospheric signatures of meteor impacts that change the chemistry of the entire planet. Each layer tells multiple stories simultaneously. The thickness of annual layers reveals the amount of snowfall in ancient years, creating a record of precipitation that spans geological time. The chemical composition of the ice reveals the atmospheric chemistry of ancient skies, how much carbon dioxide was in the air when your ancestors first learned to use fire, what the oxygen levels were when the first forests began to spread across the continents. How the atmosphere changed during the great extinctions that punctuate Earth's history. Trapped within the ice are tiny bubbles of ancient air, microscopic time capsules that contain actual samples of atmospheres from hundreds of thousands of years ago. When scientists melt these ice samples in their laboratories, they release air that last moved freely through the atmosphere when mammoths walked. The Earth, when sea levels were different, when the configuration of continents created weather patterns that no longer exist. They can measure the exact composition of these ancient atmospheres, creating a record of atmospheric change that extends far beyond any human record keeping. The ice also contains the chemical signatures of ancient dust storms, volcanic eruptions, and even cosmic events that influenced Earth's climate. Layers of ice that form during major volcanic eruptions contain elevated levels of sulfur compounds, while ice that form during periods of heavy cosmic bombardment contains traces of extraterrestrial materials. The ice becomes a record not just of Earth's internal processes, but of the planet's interaction with cosmic events that shaped its history. As you follow the ice cores deeper into the past, you discover that the frozen layers above the hidden lakes tell a story of remarkable climate stability compared to the dramatic changes recorded in the surface world. While the ice records periods of rapid climate change, ice ages that came and went, atmospheric compositions that shifted dramatically over relatively short geological periods, the lakes below remained constant, their temperature and chemistry buffered by the enormous thermal mass of the ice above and the steady heat from the Earth's interior. This stability makes the subglacial lakes even more remarkable as repositories of ancient conditions. While the surface world experienced dramatic changes, forests advancing and retreating, sea levels rising and falling by hundreds of feet, entire ecosystems appearing and disappearing, the hidden lakes maintained nearly constant conditions, preserving not just water, but entire chemical and possibly biological communities that have remained essentially unchanged for millions of years. The ice cores reveal that the current period of human civilization has occurred during a time of remarkable atmospheric stability compared to the dramatic fluctuations recorded in the deeper ice. The past 10,000 years, the entire span of human agriculture and civilization, represents a period of unusually stable climate, a calm interlude in a longer history of much more dramatic atmospheric and climatic changes. Yet, even this stability is relative. The most recent layers of ice contain the chemical signatures of human influence on the atmosphere, increasing levels of carbon dioxide from fossil fuel burning, traces of industrial pollutants that didn't exist in pre-industrial atmospheres, isotopic signatures that reveal the influence of nuclear testing and industrial processes. The ice has begun to record the Anthropocene, the geological age of human influence on Earth's atmospheric and climatic systems. The contrast between the changing atmosphere recorded in the ice and the stable conditions of the lakes below creates a profound perspective on time and change. The ice chronicles a world in constant flux, where atmospheric chemistry changes over timescales that range from years to millions of years, where climate shifts create and destroy entire ecosystems, where the very air that supports life undergoes constant transformation. Yet beneath this changing world, the hidden lakes persist in near-perfect isolation, maintaining conditions that have barely changed since they were first formed. This stability of the subglacial environment makes it a unique archive of ancient conditions. While the ice above records the changing chemistry of ancient atmospheres, the lakes below may preserve the actual chemistry of ancient oceans, the dissolved minerals and chemical signatures of water that last interacted with the surface world when Earth was a very different planet. The lakes become time capsules, not just of water, but of entire chemical systems that no longer exist anywhere else on Earth. The process of reading these frozen messages requires patience that matches the timescales of the processes being studied. Scientists spend years extracting and analyzing ice cores, measuring chemical concentrations that differ by parts per million, detecting isotopic signatures that reveal information about ancient temperatures and atmospheric conditions. Their work operates on the same temporal scales as the processes they study: patient, methodical, measured in decades rather than days. Each ice core represents a collaboration between human curiosity and geological process, between the patient, accumulation of frozen time, and the scientific tools that can decode the messages written in ice crystals. The frozen layers become a form of communication between the ancient Earth and the present moment, a way for the planet to tell its own story in the chemical language of frozen water and trapped air. As you contemplate these messages in the ice, you begin to understand that you are part of a larger story that connects the present moment to the deep past and the distant future. The ice cores reveal that change is the only constant in Earth's history, yet they also reveal the extraordinary persistence of the hidden lakes below, which have remained stable witnesses to all this change, faithful keepers of secrets that span the entire history of complex life on Earth, from the frozen messages of ancient atmospheres. Let your awareness settle into the rhythm of discovery itself, the careful, methodical process by which human curiosity approaches these hidden worlds with the same patience that created them. In research stations scattered across Antarctica's vast expanse, scientists work with tools and techniques that mirror the geological patience of the ice itself, measuring progress in millimeters rather than meters, planning expeditions that span decades rather than seasons. Imagine yourself in one of these remote research camps, where the temperature outside never rises above freezing, and the wind carries no scent except the pure, sharp breath of ice that has known no contamination from the living world. Here, in buildings that seem impossibly small against the vast white expanse of the continent, researchers prepare for expeditions into the hidden world below with the kind of careful planning that space agencies use to prepare missions to other planets. The drilling equipment they use operates with precision that would seem excessive for any ordinary purpose. Yet here, every measurement must be exact, because they are approaching an environment that has remained undisturbed for millions of years. Each drilling bit must be sterilized to prevent contamination of waters that have never been exposed to surface microorganisms. Each sample container must be prepared to preserve chemistry that exists nowhere else on Earth. Every tool, every procedure, every step in the process must be designed to minimize the impact of human presence on these pristine environments. The drilling process itself unfolds with the patience of geological time. The drill advances through the ice at rates measured in meters per day, not because the equipment is slow, but because each meter of penetration brings them closer to environments that require increasingly careful handling. As they approach the bottom of the ice sheet, where it begins to interface with the hidden lakes below, every drilling motion must be calculated to avoid breakthrough that could contaminate the lake water with drilling fluids or surface materials. You can feel the weight of responsibility that accompanies this work. These researchers know that they may be the first human beings ever to encounter water that has been isolated since before their species existed, water that may contain forms of life that represent completely separate experiments in biological evolution. The samples they collect may be the only opportunity science will ever have to study these environments, making every milliliter of water, every gram of sediment, every bubble of gas infinitely precious. The logistics of working in Antarctica require the same kind of long-term planning that the ice itself embodies. Equipment must be shipped to the continent months or even years before it can be used. Researchers must prepare for expeditions that will last entire Antarctic summers, during which they will work in conditions that test the limits of human endurance and the reliability of their equipment. Every tool, every spare part, every sample container must be anticipated and prepared in advance, because there are no hardware stores in Antarctica, No overnight deliveries to remote research camps. The process of extracting samples from the subglacial lakes requires techniques that push the boundaries of engineering and scientific methodology. Researchers must lower sampling equipment through boreholes that extend for miles through solid ice, operating instruments in conditions of extreme pressure and temperature that exist nowhere else on Earth's surface. The samples they retrieve must be preserved and analyzed using techniques that can detect life forms and chemical signatures that may be unlike anything previously known to science. Each sample that returns to the surface carries with it the potential to rewrite textbooks, to reveal new forms of life, to provide insights into Earth's history that cannot be obtained anywhere else. The water samples may contain microorganisms that have evolved in complete isolation for millions of years, representing branches of the tree of life that separated from all other known life forms before complex organisms ever evolved. The chemical analysis of these samples may reveal atmospheric and oceanic conditions from Earth's ancient past, preserved in liquid form, like chemical time capsules. The scientists who conduct this work understand that they are engaged in a form of archaeology that operates on geological timescales. They are excavating not artifacts, but entire environments, uncovering not the remains of ancient civilizations, but the living remnants of ancient Earth systems. Their work requires not just technical skill, but a philosophical patience that allows them to think in terms of millions of years while working with instruments that measure changes in micro seconds. The analysis of samples from subglacial lakes can take years to complete. Using laboratory techniques that can detect the presence of individual molecules, that can identify isotopic signatures that reveal information about ancient temperatures and chemical processes, that can amplify genetic material from organisms present in concentrations so low that they barely qualify as existing at all. Each analysis must be repeated multiple times to ensure accuracy, because the implications of the discoveries are so significant that scientific certainty requires extraordinary evidence. The researchers work with the knowledge that they are probably the only human beings who will ever have direct contact with these hidden environments. The decision to drill into a subglacial lake is not made lightly, because each penetration permanently alters the environment they are trying to study. They must balance the scientific value of the information they can obtain against the irreversible impact of their presence on ecosystems that have existed in perfect isolation for millions of years. This creates an ethical dimension to the work that is as complex as the technical challenges. The researchers must consider not just what they can learn from these environments, but whether they have the right to disturb them at all. They work under international treaties that govern Antarctica research, following protocols designed to minimize environmental impact while maximizing scientific understanding. Their work becomes a negotiation between human curiosity and environmental preservation, between the desire to understand and the responsibility to protect. The patience required for this work extends beyond the immediate research to the long-term implications of the discoveries. The organisms and chemical signatures found in subglacial lakes may provide insights into the possibility of life on other planets, particularly on the ice-covered moons of Jupiter and Saturn, where similar conditions may exist. The research techniques developed for studying Earth's subglacial lakes become the prototypes for missions that may one day search for life in the hidden oceans of Europa or Enceladus. Each day of work in these remote research stations becomes part of a larger human endeavor to understand Earth's most extreme environments and, by extension, the possibilities for life throughout the universe. The researchers work with instruments that can detect signs of life in conditions that would instantly kill any familiar organism, developing techniques that expand our definition of what constitutes a habitable environment. As you rest in contemplation of this patient work, you begin to understand that the exploration of subglacial lakes represents more than just scientific research. It represents humanity's attempt to understand the full range of possibilities for life and persistence in the universe. The patience these researchers demonstrate mirrors the patience of the ice itself, the willingness to work on timescales that transcend individual human lives in service of understanding that will benefit all future exploration of extreme environments. Whether on Earth or on distant worlds. As your journey through the hidden worlds beneath Antarctica draws toward its gentle conclusion, let your consciousness settle into quiet contemplation of the profound loneliness and extraordinary beauty of these secret places. Here, in the space between ice and rock, between the known world of surface and sky, and the unknown depths of Earth's most isolated environments, you discover something that touches the very heart of what it means to exist in a universe filled with mystery and wonder. Consider the vast solitude of these hidden lakes' water that has never reflected starlight, never felt the touch of wind, never known the gentle disturbance of rain falling on its surface. This is loneliness on a scale that transcends ordinary human experience, loneliness that has persisted for millions of years. Yet it is not empty loneliness, but rather a solitude filled with its own forms of beauty and significance. These waters exist in a state of perfect contemplation, maintaining their liquid presence in conditions that would seem impossible, holding their secrets with the patience of deep time itself. The beauty of these places lies not in visual splendor, for they exist in perfect darkness, but in the elegant complexity of the processes that sustain them. There is beauty in the delicate balance of heat and pressure that keeps them liquid, beauty in the chemical processes that unfold in slow motion across geological timescales, beauty in the circulation patterns that connect every molecule of water to every other molecule in dances that last for centuries. This is the beauty of physics and chemistry operating at the limits of possibility, creating conditions that exist nowhere else in the known universe. In these hidden chambers, you encounter the infinite in the infinitely small. Each drop of water contains within it the history of Earth's transformation from a young planet with a different atmosphere to the world we know today. Each dissolved mineral carries information about geological processes that operate on timescales that dwarf human history. Each possible microorganism, if they exist in these waters, represents evolutionary experiments that have been proceeding in isolation longer than complex life has existed on Earth's surface. The scale of these lakes challenges human understanding in ways that connect the immediately small to the incomprehensibly vast. Lake Vostok, hidden beneath miles of ice, is larger than Lake Ontario, yet it exists in conditions that make it more alien than the surface of Mars. The water in these lakes moves in currents that operate like slow-motion weather systems, creating patterns of circulation that are both impossibly complex and elegantly simple, following laws of physics that govern everything from the movement of blood through your body to the circulation of matter through galaxies. These hidden environments remind us that Earth still holds mysteries that rival anything we might discover on distant planets. While we search the universe for signs of life in extreme environments, we have barely begun to explore the extreme environments that exist beneath our own feet. The subglacial lakes of Antarctica may contain forms of life that are as alien to surface biology as anything we might expect to find on Europa or Enceladus. Yet they exist here in the depths of our own planet, waiting to be discovered and understood. Loneliness of these places becomes a mirror for our own human condition, isolated consciousness, contemplating vast scales of time and space that exceed our ability to fully comprehend. Yet in recognizing this shared condition of isolation, we find a strange form of companionship with these hidden waters. Like them, we exist in a brief moment of awareness surrounded by vast reaches of time and space. Like them, we maintain our integrity and identity, despite conditions that seem hostile to consciousness and life. There is profound humility in the recognition that these lakes have existed in their hidden state for thousands of times longer than human civilization, that they have maintained their liquid presence through ice ages and warm periods, through the rise and fall of entire evolutionary lineages, through geological processes that have reshaped continents and moved mountains. They are reminders that the Earth operates on scales of time and process that make human concerns seem momentary. Yet they also demonstrate the extraordinary persistence that is possible when conditions align to support stable systems. The darkness of these environments becomes a metaphor for the darkness that surrounds all human knowledge, the vast reaches of the unknown that stretch beyond our current understanding. Yet just as life may exist and even thrive in the perfect darkness of subglacial lakes, human understanding finds ways to illuminate even the most hidden corners of reality. The radio waves that first detected these lakes, the patient drilling that has begun to sample their waters, the careful analysis that reveals their chemistry and possible biology, all of these represent consciousness reaching into darkness and finding ways to create light, to generate understanding where none existed before. As sleep begins to approach the edges of your awareness, the hidden lakes become teachers of patience and persistence. They have waited millions of years to be discovered, and they will continue their liquid existence long after human civilization has become a thin layer in some future geological stratum. Yet in the brief moment of intersection between human curiosity and their ancient presence, they offer insights that transform our understanding of what is possible, what is persistent, what is beautiful in the universe. The space between ice and rock where these lakes exist becomes a metaphor for all the spaces between known and unknown that define the human condition. We exist in the narrow zone between too much knowledge, which would eliminate mystery and wonder, and too little knowledge, which would leave us helpless and confused. Like the lakes themselves, we find our most productive existence in the boundary zones, the interfaces between different states of understanding, where conditions are just right for consciousness to thrive and wonder to persist. In the gentle circulation of these hidden waters, in their patient chemistry and possible biology, in their extraordinary persistence across millions of years of isolation, you find a lullaby of geological time that speaks to something deep in human consciousness. These lakes remind us that the universe is vast beyond imagination, yet filled with pockets of extraordinary complexity and beauty. They teach us that patience and persistence can create stability in the most unlikely circumstances, that life and consciousness can find ways to exist and even flourish in conditions that seem impossible. As your awareness begins to merge with the rhythms of approaching sleep, the hidden lakes beneath Antarctica continue their ancient circulation, their patient chemistry, their quiet persistence in the darkness between ice and stone, carrying their secrets forward into a future that will eventually reveal them to minds capable of appreciating their profound and ancient beauty. As you contemplate this ancient mirror, you begin to understand that you are in the presence of something that transcends ordinary time, something that connects the present moment to depths of the past that are almost impossible to comprehend. Yet somehow this water has bridged that gap, remaining liquid and vital, while the world above has been transformed beyond recognition. From the vast mirror of Lake Vostok, let your consciousness dissolve into the water itself, becoming one with the liquid medium that has spent millions of years brewing its own unique chemistry in the perfect isolation of Antarctica's depths. Here, in these hidden chambers, water has become something more than simple H2O. It has become a living laboratory where chemical processes unfold according to rules that exist nowhere else on Earth. Imagine yourself as a dissolved mineral, perhaps an atom of iron that once lay locked within ancient bedrock, now free to drift through liquid darkness after millions of years of patient extraction. You have been slowly leached from the stone by water that has had geological ages to work its gentle chemistry, water that never rushes, never hurries, but simply persists with the patience of deep time until even the hardest rock surrenders. Its secrets. The water around you is rich with dissolved companions, sulfur compounds that create chemical signatures unlike anything in Earth's oceans, metallic ions that have been concentrated over millions of years until they reach concentrations that would be toxic to most surface life, yet here they simply exist as part of the unique chemistry of isolation. These are minerals that tell the story of the bedrock beneath Antarctica, carried into solution by water that has had more time than civilization has existed to extract every possible chemical from the stone below. You drift through gradients of salinity that change like invisible weather systems throughout the lake. In some regions, the water carries so many dissolved minerals that it becomes denser than normal water, creating layers that barely mix with the less concentrated water above. These chemical stratifications create boundaries within the lake that are as real as walls, separating different chemical environments that may support different forms of life. The pressure at these depths affects chemistry in ways that don't occur at Earth's surface. Chemical reactions that would proceed quickly in your everyday world unfold here with geological slowness, while other reactions that require extreme pressure become possible for the first time. It is chemistry operating under conditions that exist nowhere else on our planet, creating compounds and molecular structures that may be unique to these hidden environments. Dissolved gases move through the water like ghosts of ancient atmospheres. Some of these gases were trapped in ice millions of years ago, when Earth's atmosphere had a different composition, when different combinations of oxygen and carbon dioxide and trace gases painted the sky in colors that no human eye has ever seen. As this ancient ice melts at the bottom of the sheet above, it releases these atmospheric time capsules into the lake water, where they remain dissolved like messages from Earth's distant past. Oxygen exists here, but not the oxygen you breathe. This oxygen has been extracted from ancient ice by processes that operate over millions of years, concentrated in the water until it reaches levels that would be supersaturated at surface pressure. Yet under the enormous pressure of the deep lake, this oxygen remains dissolved, creating an environment that might support forms of life that breathe in ways completely different from surface organisms. The chemistry of these waters is painted by the absence of sunlight as much as by the presence of dissolved minerals. Without photosynthesis to drive the chemical cycles that dominate surface waters, the chemistry here operates according to different rules. Chemical energy comes not from the sun, but from the interaction between dissolved minerals, from the slow oxidation of metals, from chemical gradients that have been building for millions of years. You sense the presence of organic compounds, carbon-based molecules that may be the signatures of life, or perhaps just the products of chemical processes that can create lifelike molecules without any living organisms at all. These compounds drift through the water like chemical poetry, complex molecules that tell stories of reactions that have been proceeding in darkness for longer than complex life has existed on Earth's surface. The water itself has been transformed by its long isolation. The pressure has compressed it into a denser form, while the constant temperature has allowed it to reach a state of chemical equilibrium that normal water never achieves. Every molecule of water has had millions of years to find its perfect place in the liquid matrix, creating a medium that is more organized, more stable, more chemically sophisticated than the chaotic water of rivers and oceans. Chemical cycles operate here on timescales that dwarf human understanding. What might take minutes or hours in a surface environment takes centuries or millennia in these depths. Chemical reactions unfold like slow-motion explosions, their progress measured, not in seconds, but in geological ages. Yet this slowness allows for chemical complexity at rapid surface. Chemistry cannot achieve intricate molecular structures that require time to form. Chemical equilibria that develop over millions of years. The boundaries between different chemical zones in the lake create interfaces where unique reactions occur. Where water rich in iron meets water rich in sulfur, chemical precipitation creates microscopic mineral formations that have never been seen by human eyes. Where waters of different salinity meet, chemical gradients drive reactions that might support forms of life adapted to harvesting energy from concentration differences rather than from sunlight or organic matter. Temperature variations of just a few degrees create chemical weather patterns throughout the lake. Warmer water near the geothermal sources carries different dissolved compounds than cooler water near the ice ceiling, creating circulation patterns that distribute chemical nutrients throughout the lake in cycles that operate over centuries. These chemical currents are like the bloodstream of the lake, carrying dissolved life support systems to every corner of the hidden water body. Some of the chemistry here may be creating conditions that could support chemosynthetic life organisms that derive energy not from sunlight, but from chemical reactions involving dissolved minerals. The high concentrations of sulfur, iron, and other reactive compounds could provide the chemical fuel for bacteria that have learned to eat rocks and breathe metals, converting the chemistry of dissolved minerals into the energy of life. The water also contains dissolved particles of ice that have been melted and refrozen countless times, creating a microscopic suspension of ice crystals that exist in a state between solid and liquid. These ice particles carry within them the chemical signatures of different layers of the ice sheet above, creating a mixture that represents the entire history of ice accumulation over Antarctica during the past millions of years. As you drift through this alien chemistry, you begin to understand that these hidden lakes are not just bodies of water. They are chemical reactors that have been operating for millions of years, creating combinations of dissolved compounds that exist nowhere else on Earth. The water here has become a unique solution, a liquid that has spent geological ages perfecting its chemistry in the perfect isolation of Antarctica's depths. This chemical solitude has created an environment that may support forms of life so different from surface organisms that they might represent entirely new branches of the tree of life, organisms that have evolved to thrive in chemical conditions that would be instantly lethal to most Earth life. Yet here they may find not just survival, but abundance in chemistry. Chapter 1. The weight of silence. This is water that has been liquid since before your species walked the earth. It flows in cathedral darkness, its surface still as black glass, reflecting nothing but the weight of ice above. The water here is not quite like the water you know. It carries within it the dissolved minerals of ancient rock, the chemical whispers of a planet's deep metabolism. It tastes of time itself, of pressure and darkness, and the slow patience of geological process. These hidden lakes exist in a state of perfect isolation, sealed away from the surface world by miles of ice that act like the ultimate lid on the ultimate jar. The water moves in slow currents, driven by the faint heat that rises from Earth's core, like the planet's own heartbeat, warming these buried chambers. It is a circulation system that operates on timescales that dwarf human history, moving nutrients and minerals, and perhaps even life itself, through networks of liquid pathways that connect like arteries beneath the ice. In this profound darkness, you feel the weight of silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper. It is the silence of deep time, of processes that unfold over millions of years, of water that has waited patiently in darkness while continents drifted and mountains rose and fell above. This is the silence of the eternal, the hush that comes from being in the presence of something far older and more patient than human consciousness can easily grasp. The water here pulses with its own rhythm, responding to tides that you cannot see, to the gravitational pull of moon and sun filtered through miles of ice. It rises and falls in patterns that no human eye has witnessed, creating beaches of stone and silt that have never known footprints, shores that have never heard the sound of waves breaking in air. And in this silence, this perfect isolation, This cathedral of liquid darkness, you begin to sense that you are not alone. Something moves in these waters, something that has adapted to conditions that exist nowhere else on Earth. Life, perhaps, but life so different from what you know that it barely seems like life at all organisms that have learned to exist in. Perpetual darkness, feeding on chemistry instead of sunlight, breathing minerals instead of air dot from the profound silence of those hidden depths. Your consciousness rises gently, like a bubble of awareness, floating up through layers of understanding. You emerge from the cathedral darkness of subglacial lakes into a different kind of mystery, the story of how these secret worlds were first discovered by human minds that refused to accept that ice was simply ice, and nothing more. Let your thoughts drift to a research station perched on Antarctica's surface, where scientists huddle around instruments that seem almost magical in their ability to see through solid ice. Picture them in their thick parkas and frost-covered beards, operating equipment that sends invisible signals deep into the frozen earth, then waits patiently for whispered replies that travel back from impossible depths. The story begins with radio waves, pulses of energy that move through ice like thoughts moving through a dreaming mind. These electromagnetic signals pierce downward through the layers of frozen time you've just explored, each wave carrying a question that echoes through the crystalline structure of compressed snow and ancient ice. The signals move at the speed of light, but in the context of geological time, they are urgent messengers racing to uncover secrets that have waited millions of years to be found. Imagine yourself as one of these radio waves, racing downward through the ice sheet with purposeful determination. You pass through the upper layers where the ice still remembers storms and seasons, through the middle depths where pressure has transformed snow into something denser and more patient, and finally into the deepest regions where ice flows like slow honey under the enormous weight of everything above. For most of your journey, you encounter only more ice layer after layer of frozen water that reflects your signal back in predictable patterns. The ice speaks to you in a language of crystals and compression, telling you stories of accumulation and pressure, of time measured in millennia rather than moments. But then suddenly, you reach something different. At the boundary between ice and rock, where the weight of the continent presses down against the ancient stone beneath, you discover interfaces that shouldn't exist. Your radio wave encounters pockets of liquid water, not the solid ice you expected, but something that responds differently to your electromagnetic touch. These hidden lakes reflect your signal back with a signature that is unmistakably that of liquid water, water that has somehow remained unfrozen despite being buried beneath miles of ice. The scientists on the surface receive your return signal like a message from another world. Their instruments detect the subtle differences in how radio waves bounce back from ice versus water, creating maps of invisible coastlines that exist in perpetual darkness. They discover lake shores that have never known tides, beaches of ancient sediment that have never felt footprints, expanses of liquid water that stretch for miles. Beneath the crushing weight of ice. Each reflected signal carries information encoded in its electromagnetic signature. The strength of the return tells them about the depth of water. The clarity of the signal reveals the chemical composition of the liquid. The pattern of reflection maps the underwater topography of lake floors that have been hidden since before human civilization began. Through these radio echoes, they begin to understand the architecture of a hidden world. You follow the patient work of these explorers as they slowly piece together the puzzle of subglacial Antarctica. They discover that what appeared to be solid ice is actually honeycombed with liquid chambers, connected by networks of flowing water that create a vast underground circulation system. Their instruments reveal lakes the size of small countries, rivers that flow in darkness for hundreds of miles, and wetlands that exist in conditions unlike anywhere else on Earth. The mapping process unfolds with the patience of the ice itself. Each radio pulse provides just one small piece of information, one tiny glimpse into the structure of the hidden landscape below. Scientists must combine thousands of these signals, collected over years of careful observation, to create their maps of the invisible world. It is detective work on a geological scale, where each clue must be interpreted through layers of ice and time. As you drift through this process of discovery, you begin to understand that these radio waves are more than just scientific tools. They are acts of communication across impossible barriers. The ice becomes a medium through which human curiosity speaks to ancient water, and the water responds with its own electromagnetic voice, telling stories of isolation and persistence that span millions of years. The scientists learn to read the subtle variations in how their signals bounce back, interpreting the electromagnetic dialect of different types of ice and water. They discover that some lakes are connected by channels that allow water to flow between them, creating a circulation system that operates on timescales measured in centuries. They find evidence of lakes that fill and drain in cycles that take thousands of years to complete, responding to changes in ice pressure and underground heat flow. Through their patient listening, they begin to understand that the hidden world beneath Antarctica is not static, but dynamic, alive with processes that unfold according to their own ancient rhythms. Water moves between lakes like blood through arteries, carrying dissolved minerals, and perhaps even microscopic life forms from one hidden chamber to another. The entire system pulses with a metabolism that operates on geological time, breathing in and out over cycles that dwarf human history. You feel the excitement that must have filled those research stations as each new discovery was made, each new lake mapped, each new connection between hidden water bodies revealed. The radio waves that began as simple scientific instruments became messengers carrying news of one of Earth's last great secrets, proof that our planet still holds mysteries waiting to be discovered by those patient enough to listen to echoes. From the deep, the echoes continue to arrive, carrying with them whispers of chemical compositions that speak of ancient atmospheres, of mineral concentrations that tell stories of geological processes, of temperatures and pressures that create conditions unlike anywhere else on our planet. Each returning signal adds another brushstroke to the portrait of this hidden world, revealing landscapes that exist in perfect darkness, waiting to tell their stories to anyone who knows how to listen to the language of radio, waves, and reflected light. But even as these discoveries unfold, new questions emerge from the data, deeper mysteries that the radio waves can only hint at, secrets that require more intimate exploration to fully understand. Now that your mind has followed the radio waves into discovery, let your consciousness settle deeper into understanding the delicate miracle that keeps these hidden lakes liquid in a world of ice. Like an architect examining a building's foundation, you begin to perceive the elegant forces that create and maintain these impossible chambers of water beneath Antarctica's frozen heart. Imagine yourself as a molecule of heat, born in the molten core of our planet, beginning a journey that will take millions of years. You rise through layers of rock and metal, carried by currents of liquid stone that move with the patience of geological time. This is heat that remembers the birth of Earth itself, energy left over from the violent collisions that built our world from cosmic dust and debris 4.5 billion years ago. As you ascend through the planet's interior, you pass through the mantle, a sea of rock so hot it flows like honey, yet so pressurized it remains solid despite temperatures that would instantly vaporize any substance on Earth's surface. You move through convection currents that operate like an impossibly slow-motion storm, carrying heat from the depths toward the surface in patterns that reshape continents and move oceans across millions of years. Your journey as this molecule of heat brings you finally to the base of Antarctica's ice sheet, where you encounter the ancient bedrock that forms the foundation of the continent. Here, miles beneath the surface ice, you release your energy in a gentle, Constant warming that raises the temperature of rock and ice just enough to create the impossible liquid water in a world where everything should be frozen solid. But heat alone is not enough to explain these hidden lakes. You must also understand the role of pressure, that invisible force created by the immense weight of ice pressing down from above. Feel yourself now as a droplet of water trapped at the boundary between ice and rock, experiencing pressures that transform your very nature. The weight above you is almost incomprehensible. Imagine if every person who ever lived was standing on your shoulders simultaneously. This pressure, measured in units that would crush any structure humans have ever built, creates conditions that exist nowhere else on our planet's surface. Under this crushing embrace, water behaves differently than it does in your everyday experience. In the physics of your kitchen, water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But here, beneath miles of ice, pressure lowers the freezing point, allowing water to remain liquid at temperatures that would create ice cubes in your freezer. It is a delicate balance. Too little pressure, and the water would freeze solid. Too much, and it would be compressed into exotic forms of ice that exist only in the most extreme conditions. This pressure also affects the ice itself, transforming it from the brittle substance you know into something more like putty or clay. The ice flows and deforms under its own weight, creating spaces and chambers where liquid water can collect and persist. The bottom of the ice sheet becomes sculpted by this flow, creating valleys and basins that fill with water like hidden reservoirs. Carved from frozen time, you begin to understand that these subglacial lakes exist within a narrow zone of possibility, a Goldilocks region where conditions are not too hot, not too cold, not too pressurized, not too loose, but just right for liquid water to persist in perpetual darkness. It is an architecture of isolation built from the most fundamental forces of physics: gravity, pressure, heat, and time working together to create sanctuaries for liquid water in the most unlikely places. The boundaries of these lakes are not shores as you would recognize them, but interfaces between different states of matter. Where the water meets ice, a constant process of melting and freezing occurs as temperatures fluctuate by fractions of degrees and pressures shift with the slow movement of ice above. These boundaries are alive with transformation, constantly reshaping themselves as the delicate balance of forces shifts over timescales measured in centuries. Some lakes grow larger as more ice melts from above, or as geothermal heat increases from below. Others shrink as cooling occurs, or as the weight of ice above changes the pressure balance. The lakes breathe with these changes, expanding and contracting like lungs filling and emptying with air, except their breaths are measured not in seconds, but in millennia. The water within these chambers circulates in patterns driven by the subtle temperature differences created by geothermal heating. Warmer water rises from depths where it contacts heated rock, while cooler water sinks toward the lake floor, creating convection currents that move with the stately grace of celestial mechanics. These currents transport dissolved minerals and nutrients throughout the lake, creating chemical gradients that may support forms of life adapted to this unique environment. You sense the profound isolation of these water bodies cut off from Earth's surface for millions of years, yet sustained by the planet's own internal heat and the physics of pressure and phase change. They are like bottles thrown into an ocean of ice, carrying within them samples of Earth's ancient past, preserved in liquid form, while the world above transforms through ice ages and warm periods, through the rise and fall of species, through the entire history of complex life on our planet, that the architecture of these hidden lakes is both robust and fragile. Robust because the fundamental forces that create them, geothermal heat and gravitational pressure, operate on timescales that dwarf human history. The lakes have persisted through multiple ice ages, through periods when sea levels rose and fell by hundreds of feet, through the coming and going of entire ecosystems on Earth's surface, yet they are also fragile because they depend on a delicate balance of conditions that could be disrupted by changes in climate, ice thickness, or geothermal activity. The warming of Antarctica's ice due to climate change could alter the pressure conditions that maintain these lakes. Changes in the planet's internal heat flow could shift the temperature balance that keeps them liquid. As you contemplate this architecture of isolation, you begin to appreciate the profound engineering that nature has accomplished here. Without blueprints or planning, without conscious design or intention, the fundamental forces of physics have collaborated to create chambers of liquid water in the most improbable places. These lakes are masterpieces of natural architecture, spaces carved from impossibility and maintained by the patient operation of physical laws across millions of years. The water in these hidden chambers has become something unique, not quite the water of oceans or rivers or rain, but water that has been transformed by pressure and isolation into something that exists nowhere else on Earth. It is water that has learned to exist in conditions that would be instantly fatal to most forms of life. Water that has developed its own chemistry and physics in the crucible of extreme pressure and perpetual darkness. And in this transformed water, in these chambers sculpted from ice and sustained by the planet's own breath of heat, conditions may exist that support forms of life unlike anything that has ever been discovered. Organisms that have learned to thrive in Earth's most isolated and extreme environments. Let your awareness drift now to the most famous of these hidden worlds. Lake Vostok, a body of water so ancient and isolated that it seems to exist in a different epoch entirely. Named after the Russian research station that sits unknowingly above it, this lake is larger than Lake Ontario, yet it has remained completely hidden from human eyes, sealed beneath more than 2 miles of ice for 15 million years. 15 million years. Let that number settle into your consciousness like sediment falling through still water. 15 million years ago, when the first drops of water entered this hidden chamber, the ancestors of modern humans had not yet learned to walk upright. Saber-toothed cats prowled landscapes that no longer exist. The Mediterranean Sea was a series of isolated salt lakes. The mountains you know today were different shapes, worn by different weather, under different skies. Close your eyes and imagine yourself descending once again through those miles of ice, but this time with a destination, the surface of Lake Vostok itself. As you approach this ancient mirror, you carry with you the weight of all that time, all those millions of years during which this water has waited in perfect darkness, undisturbed by wind or weather, untouched by any influence from the world. Above, the surface of Lake Vostok stretches before you like polished obsidian, so still that it seems more like a solid than a liquid. There are no ripples here, no waves breaking against hidden shores. The water lies in perfect repose, its surface tension undisturbed by any breath of air, any tremor of movement. This is water that has forgotten what wind feels like, water that has never known the touch of sunlight or moonlight or the shadow of clouds. Passing overhead, the lake extends for 160 miles in length and 30 miles in width, a vast inland sea that exists in conditions of perpetual night. Its deepest parts reach down over 2,600 feet, creating underwater landscapes that have never been mapped, underwater mountains and valleys that rise and fall in formations, sculpted by processes that operate in complete isolation from the surface. Every molecule of water in this lake is a time traveler, carrying within its simple structure the chemical memory of Earth as it existed when the first ice began to accumulate above. These water molecules have been liquid for longer than complex life has existed on land. They remember a world when the only living things were microscopic, when the chemistry of Earth's atmosphere was different, when the continents themselves occupied different positions on the globe. The water here is not the water you drink or swim in. 15 million years of isolation have transformed it into something unique, something that exists nowhere else on our planet. The pressure at this depth, over 350 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level, has compressed the water into a denser form, while the constant temperature just below freezing has created conditions that preserve chemical signatures from Earth's ancient past. Dissolved within this water are minerals leached from the rock below over millions of years, creating a chemical cocktail that tells the story of the bedrock beneath Antarctica. Iron and sulfur compounds color the water in shades invisible to human eyes, while gases trapped from ancient atmospheres create pockets of chemistry that science is only beginning to understand. The lake exists in a state of dynamic equilibrium that has persisted longer than mountain ranges have stood. The ice above continues to accumulate, grain by grain, storm by storm, adding its weight to the already enormous pressure that keeps the lake liquid. Yet this same ice also melts at its base, where it contacts the warmer water below, adding fresh material to the lake while maintaining its volume through processes that balance over geological time. At the bottom of Lake Vostok, sediments have accumulated like the pages of an unread book. Each layer represents thousands of years of deposition, carrying within it the microscopic remains of whatever life may have existed in this isolated world. These sediments may contain fossils of organisms that evolved in complete isolation, species that represent evolutionary experiments conducted in Earth's most extreme laboratory. The shores of this lake, if shores is even the right word for the boundaries between liquid water and solid ice, extend through landscapes that have never known the footprint of any living thing larger than a microbe. There are beaches here made of minerals and ice crystals, underwater cliffs that drop into abyssal depths, hidden bays and inlets, carved by currents that flow according to patterns undisturbed by any external influence. The temperature of the water varies by only a few degrees throughout the entire lake, maintained in a narrow range by the balance between geothermal heat rising from below and the cooling effect of the ice above. This thermal stability has persisted for millions of years, creating conditions that could support life forms adapted to this unique environment. Life that has had 15 million years to evolve in complete isolation from the rest of Earth's biosphere. Imagine floating on the surface of this ancient mirror, looking up at a ceiling of ice that extends upward for more than 2 miles. That ceiling is not smooth, but sculpted by the slow flow of ice over millennia, creating formations that resemble an upside-down landscape of hills and valleys, all carved from frozen water and lit by no light at all. The ice directly above the lake's surface is different from the ice higher up. It has been melted and refrozen countless times, creating a complex interface between the liquid world below and the solid world above. The acoustics of this space would be unlike anything in the surface world. Sound would travel differently through water that has been compressed by such enormous pressure, in a chamber bounded by ice instead of air. If you could somehow produce a sound here, it would echo off the ice ceiling and the lake floor in patterns that have never been heard, creating reverberations that might continue for minutes in the perfect stillness of this isolated world. Water in Lake Vostok circulates in patterns driven by the subtle heat differences created by geothermal warming from below. These currents move with stately slowness, completing their circuits over periods measured in centuries rather than seasons. They transport dissolved chemicals and perhaps microscopic life forms throughout the lake, creating gradients of chemistry and biology that change over timescales that dwarf human observation. Scientists believe that Lake Vostok may be connected to other subglacial lakes through channels carved in the ice and rock, creating a network of waterways that allows for the exchange of water and potentially life between these isolated worlds. If this is true, then Lake Vostok is not just an isolated chamber, but part of a vast underground circulation system that spans much of Antarctica, a hidden continent of liquid water flowing beneath the visible continent of ice dot. The age of this lake makes it a repository of film, Earth's history unlike any other place on our planet. While the surface world has been transformed by ice ages and warm periods, by the rise and fall of species, by the movement of continents and the evolution of atmosphere and ocean, Lake Vostok has remained constant, preserving within its depths a sample of Earth as it existed 15 million years ago. As you contemplate this ancient mirror, you begin to understand that you are in the presence of something that transcends ordinary time, something that connects the present moment to depths of the past that are almost impossible to comprehend. Yet somehow, this water has bridged that gap, remaining liquid and vital, while the world above has been transformed beyond recognition.